Hi, hope you're well. In this one, I'm taking a quick look at the Deros RS, a slightly unusual sander from Mirka. Now, I've looked at sanders before, and they mostly fall into two camps: larger 150mm random orbital sanders and smaller orbital or palm sanders. In fact, I've said before, and I'll say it again, for most of the work that most people do, then the combination of a reasonably aggressive random orbital alongside a smaller orbital sander is actually pretty hard to beat. Of course, there are other more specialist sanders around: delta sanders for detail work, linear sanders, belt sanders for rougher work or for removing material quickly, power files, basically skinny belt sanders for awkward spaces, and a geared sander like the Festool Rotex, which try to be all things to all people, albeit at a price. And I don't just mean money. And this is where the Mirka Deros RS gets properly interesting, because it's actually none of the above. The RS in the name stands for Rotary sander. Yes, literally a spinning disc. That's unusual, but not unique. Years back, Festool had a couple of rotary sanders, the RAS or RAS series, a RAS 115 and a RAS 180, and they had more in common with an angle grinder, especially if you had the RAS 115 like I did, that was exactly the same sized discs. These were pretty brutal sanders with a coarse grit disc. You'd almost grind concrete with them. And there was a period of my life back in the handyman days when I was using the RAS 115 regularly to clean up the stone sills on Victorian bay windows. These sanders had a slightly half-hearted attempt at dust collection, so were strictly for outdoor use, but this Mirka Deros RS is a very different beast altogether. And it is a bit of a beast. It is a big piece of kit, and on first glance I thought it might have been the reincarnation of the RAS 180, but no, this is just a standard 150mm or 6-inch disc. Despite its size though, it is lightweight, though oddly it feels lighter than it actually is, and I was surprised when I was checking the specs to find that this was almost 2 kilos. That's a ½ kilo more than Festool's ETSEC. Honestly, if I hadn't checked the spec sheet, I'd have said they were the other way around in terms of weight. The Mirka is incredibly quiet though. That's it running at mid-speed. Even at full speed, it doesn't get much louder, and any dust extractor that you connect to it will be far, far louder than the sander alone. As you'd expect from a rotary sander, it can be very aggressive. I took this piece of Idigbo from Sawn back to smooth in under 90 seconds, and using just 2 grits of abrasive, Mirka's Abranet HD P80 to start with and a P180 to finish. I did this as a just because I can test for the 10-Minute Workshop Plus members. I'll tell you what, I'll run that clip from the exclusive member video in its entirety now. I use the same piece of Abranet. This is a P80 Abranet HD. This will be louder just because of the extractor. Medium speed. I mean, that's incredible. It hasn't been through a thicknesser. That's just sawn. So we've got P180. I mean, that's it. You gotta finish. Snagging on there. No snagging on there. That seems right, we should be using Leo's wax. You can see the difference in the finish from sawn to silky smooth. Yeah, pretty impressive. Obviously that's the stress test, the torture test. You wouldn't need to do that in normal circumstances. You'd plane it, you'd put it through a thicknesser, but as an example of how aggressive a sander it can be, it's pretty impressive, especially when you consider how quiet it is and how good the finish is too. What surprised me though was how good it was at sanding more delicate surfaces. I've had this for a few weeks now. I missed the launch earlier in the year, and Mirka were kind enough to send this one over for me to have a quick look at. It is a review unit, and I'll be returning it to them when I'm done here. So I've had it for a few weeks, and in recent videos I've sanded pencil marks off the face veneers of birch ply without any problems, and also sanded back the much thinner face veneers on some marine ply when I made my recent plywood storage boxes, and again it managed this without causing me any issues whatsoever. For a sander that can go from sawn to smooth in a minute and a half, that really is very good. The controls are well laid out on the top of the handle with a simple non-proprietary hose connector on the back, and as you'd expect from a Mirka sander, the dust extraction is very good. Incidentally, there is also an additional dust shroud for this that comes in the box. I haven't bothered to fit it as it does stop you from getting right into an edge, and I've no issues with it so far anyway. If you're sanding larger, flatter areas like a table, then it's probably worth having. Do be sure to read the revised instruction manual though, as my YouTube pal Keith Brown had some problems with his. I'll link to Keith's video down below, and do watch out for Leo at Hand Eye Crafts video as well, who has one of these on longer term tests too. So where does something like this fit into the overall sander marketplace? Who's the likely competition? Well, a belt sander of course would be the usual choice for aggressive sanding, but by all accounts this Mirka is more aggressive and leaves a better finish too. How about a gear driven sander like Festool's Rotex? There is a bit of a knack to handling a Rotex, and as I said at the start, the Rotex has some additional overhead in terms of weight and usability. They're fine on the flat, but no fun whatsoever overhead. And while the Rotex can duplicate the functions of, say, a polisher, that's only really useful if you actually need a polisher. The Mirka is starting to feel like a bit of a sander holy grail, an aggressive sander that's quiet, smooth, easy to handle, and leaves a great finish, but one that will also deal with delicate work and won't burn through the wafer-thin face veneers on commercial plywood. Of course, it's not all sweetness and light. While I'm delighted that there's no flappy paddle on this one, I'm happy enough with the layout overall, but I'm not really a fan of the push-button switchgear, where the safety features seem to get in the way of the usability. The plus-minus speed control works as you'd expect, but you have to press and hold the off button to start the thing, or short press the on-off, then press the lock button within 1 second. There's also an option to ramp up the speed control depending on the amount of pressure you apply on the sander, like the variable speed on the flappy paddle Deros. I'll be leaving that well alone, thanks. But in spite of all that, it is quite a magnificent sander, although probably one that I won't be adding to my sander stable. I gave away the one small belt sander that I owned years ago, and I haven't missed it at all. And while I still have the Rotex, I couldn't tell you when I last used it. In fact, I just don't really have the need for aggressive sanding these days, and that's for finish sanding. I already have that covered, though if I didn't, then the Deros RS would have a lot more appeal. I never like to talk about cost specifically because prices do vary. But broadly, in terms of cost, the list price of the RS is currently about £15 to £20 more than the Festool ET-SEC and about £50 to £60 less than the same sized Rotex. So not outrageous, but certainly not cheap. You can get the cost down a little bit by opting to have a box instead of the Sustainer, but like buying an expensive car with cloth seats, that small economy may come back to bite you later if you ever decide to move it on. So yes, a great sander. I'd love to have one, but I don't have the need for one. So unusually my head will win out over my heart this time, and it'll go back to Mirka whenever they remember that I have it, of course. I'll call this one done for now though. Thanks so much for taking a look. As always, leave a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.